when Cancer finally chooses themselves. There comes a moment, soft as breath, quiet as moonlight, when a Cancer stops waiting to be chosen and starts choosing themselves. This isn't the kind of story that begins with rage. It begins with exhaustion. Not the kind of tired you fix with sleep, but the kind that lives in your bones after carrying everyone else's sorrow while quietly hiding your own. You see, Cancer, you've been the sanctuary, the safe place, the warm voice in the middle of someone else's storm. And you did it so beautifully, so naturally, that no one ever thought to ask, but who holds you? So you started holding yourself, not because you wanted to, but because you had to. Somewhere along the way, you realized that being everything for everyone was costing you the most important person of all, you. And that realization didn't come like thunder. It came like a whisper. In the middle of a quiet night, after yet another conversation where you said, "I understand," when your heart wanted to scream, "But what about me?" And maybe you cried alone. Maybe you turned your face to the pillow so no one would hear you break. But even in that silence, something inside you shifted. You didn't know it yet, but your healing had already begun. This reading, this message, is not for the Cancer who's still pretending. It's for the Cancer who's starting to feel the tremble of a boundary being born, who's tired of apologizing for needing space, who's learning that choosing yourself is not betrayal, it's survival. So today, we open that door together. We light a candle for the version of you who was always strong for others, and we invite in the version who is finally strong for you. Welcome home, Cancer. This is your chapter now. The Tower doesn't destroy you, it frees you. The first card that comes through for you, Cancer, is the Tower. I know, that card makes people flinch, because it looks like destruction, like everything falling apart. But for you, this isn't destruction, it's release. The Tower doesn't destroy you, it frees you from the things that were never built to hold you. And oh, how long you've stayed in things that were already crumbling. You stayed in conversations where you weren't truly heard. You stayed in relationships where your giving heart was seen as a weakness. You stayed in versions of yourself that shrank just to keep someone else comfortable. Because that's what you were taught. To endure, to understand, to forgive before you're even offered an apology. But the Tower doesn't ask for permission. It crashes through the illusion that love must always mean sacrifice. That safety means staying silent. That being good means being small. And when the walls fall, when the smoke clears, you're left standing there, shaken, maybe, alone, possibly, but free. You might be wondering, if I let go of this, what's left of me? And the answer is, everything that is real, because what's collapsing now was never your soul. It was just the mask you wore to survive. It was the emotional labor you weren't meant to carry forever. The yes you said when your heart was begging to say no. The endless bending, the quiet resentment, the ache of being too much and never enough at the same time. So when the Tower shows up, Cancer, it's not the end of you. It's the end of the version of you who thought they had to be a martyr in order to be loved. You are not falling apart. You are falling into truth. And maybe, just maybe, this is the beginning of your real self, rising from the rubble, unapologetically whole. The lies we tell ourselves, just to keep loving the wrong people. You didn't just wake up one day and decide to abandon yourself, Cancer. It happened slowly, softly, like waves eroding the edges of a shoreline, until you looked up and realized you were standing on almost nothing. The card that appears now is the Eight of Swords. A woman blindfolded, trapped by swords that don't actually touch her. She's caged not by steel, but by stories. And for you, Cancer, those stories were shaped by guilt, love, and survival. You whispered them to yourself. On nights you should have walked away, but didn't. They're going through a lot, I can't leave them now. I'm just being too sensitive. It's not really that bad. If I just love them a little more, maybe they'll finally see me. Maybe I'm the problem. These are not truths. These are chains. Chains forged from your tenderness, from your longing to be enough for someone who didn't know how to receive you. You thought if you stayed small, quiet, understanding, they'd finally love you the way you deserved. But that's the trick of the Eight of Swords, Cancer. You're not trapped because of them. You're trapped because of the lies you've agreed to live inside. And here's the most painful part. They weren't always lies. Sometimes they were coping mechanisms. Stories you built to survive when leaving felt more terrifying than staying. But now, you know better. And knowing changes everything. Because when you see the cage, you can no longer pretend it's a home. And when you recognize the voice that says, maybe I'm too much, you begin to realize that voice was never yours to begin with. So what happens now? You take off the blindfold. You stop shrinking. You stop justifying love that feels like absence. You stop holding space for people who never learned how to hold space for you. The cage was never locked, Cancer. And the moment you stop defending it is the moment you start reclaiming your freedom. When you say no for the first time, it won't feel like freedom. It'll feel like fear. The first time you say no, you'll feel like you're breaking something. Like you just set fire to a bridge you spent years building with your bare hands. And maybe you did. But Cancer, maybe that bridge only ever led you back into pain. The card that shows up now is the Lovers. Reversed. Not about romantic fairy tales. This is the moment you choose yourself, instead of choosing to keep the peace. And let's be honest, peace is what you were always chasing. Even if it meant you had to swallow your truth, even if it meant you had to hurt in silence, so that someone else could be comfortable. But this time, your soul refused. And when you said no, the world around you shook. People didn't say, I'm proud of you for honoring your truth. They said, you've changed. You're acting different. You used to be so kind. But what they really meant was, you're no longer easy to manipulate. And yes, it hurts. It hurts when the people you love only love the version of you who never asked for anything. It hurts when your boundaries feel like betrayal to those who benefited from your silence. You might feel guilty. You might question yourself. You might lie awake wondering if you're becoming cold, selfish, unrecognizable. But listen to me, Cancer. You are not becoming cold. You are becoming clear. You're finally seeing the cost of abandoning yourself. And you've decided that you're no longer available for that kind of pain. This isn't rebellion. This is remembering. Remembering the sound of your own voice after years of only whispering. Remembering that your needs matter too. Remembering that love without respect isn't love, it's dependency. So if your no makes the room shake, let it shake. If your truth causes silence, let it echo. Because the ones who only stayed because you had no boundaries were never really staying for you. And now, you are. The anger you buried is still alive, and it deserves to be heard. You were never allowed to be angry, were you, Cancer? Anger made you feel dangerous, wrong, unlovable, so you became soft, quiet, forgiving, even when every part of you was screaming inside. And now, here it comes. Not as rage, but as resentment, as emotional exhaustion, as the deep ache of someone who's carried too much for too long and was never once asked, are you okay? The card that reveals itself now is the Queen of Cups, reversed. This is your soul's reflection. The empath who gave until empty. The nurturer who forgot she was allowed to be held too. The heart that poured endlessly into people who never noticed you were drowning. You were taught that anger breaks connection. But the truth is, repressing your anger is what's been breaking you. Because buried beneath your patience, your compassion, your endless understanding, is a fire. And that fire is sacred. You were angry when they crossed your boundaries, but you stayed. You were angry when they dismissed your pain, but you smiled. You were angry when they made you the villain, for finally asking for what you needed, but you apologized anyway. Why? Because somewhere deep down, you believed being angry made you unworthy of love. But let me tell you something, Cancer. Your anger is not a threat. It is a compass. It points you toward what matters. It rises when your soul says, this is not okay. And it is not something to suppress. It is something to listen to. You are allowed to feel all of it. The betrayal, the frustration, the the grief of being overlooked. Again and again, let yourself rage in safe ways. Cry in wild waves. Write the words you were never allowed to say. Because your anger is not you being broken. It's you finally coming back to yourself. You are not too much. You are finally honest. In that honesty, that's where healing begins. You stayed, not because it was love, but because you promised you would. Some promises are made in love, but some are made in survival. You told yourself you'd stay in the friendship that drains you, in the relationship that makes you question your worth, in the family pattern that silences your truth, because you're loyal. Loyal to the memory, loyal to the version of them who once held you when you cried, loyal to the potential, the what if, the belief that if you just hold on a little longer, maybe they'll become the person you needed all along. But Cancer, at what cost? The tarot lays before you now the devil, a card not of evil, but of attachment, of chains that don't even need locks, because you've convinced yourself you belong there. You've called it love, but love shouldn't hurt this much. You've called it loyalty, but loyalty that demands you betray yourself is just another form of emotional captivity. So let's ask the real question. Are you staying because it's still real? Or because you're afraid of what happens if you leave? You're loyal, Cancer. Fiercely, beautifully loyal. But loyalty without discernment becomes self-abandonment. It becomes nights lying awake, wondering why you always feel empty, around the people who are supposed to fill you. They say you're the one who always comes back, the one who forgives before the apology, the one who never leaves even when everyone else does. But who does that serve now? Who's benefiting from your inability to walk away? Not you. Not the version of you who dreams of peace, of realness, of love that doesn't require you to bleed just to belong. You can still love people from a distance. You can still honor the past without sacrificing your future. You can let go, not with anger, but with grace. Because choosing yourself is not breaking a promise. It's making a new one where you finally come first. Every no you whisper is a small rebellion and a sacred return to yourself. You never wanted to push anyone away. That's never been who you are, Cancer. You let people in. You held them when they couldn't hold themselves. You stayed long after it started hurting. So when you finally started placing boundaries, when you finally said, "No, I can't carry this anymore. No, I need time. No, that doesn't feel right to me," it felt unnatural, painful, even. Because no one teaches the nurturer how to defend their own energy. And the first time you build a boundary, you'll feel like you're betraying someone, but you're not betraying them. You're just no longer betraying you. The card that rises now is the Seven of Wands, a figure standing alone, protecting their space, refusing to be overwhelmed by the opinions, the demands, the guilt. That figure, Cancer, is you. And yes, it's uncomfortable. People may resist your new boundaries, not because you're wrong, but because they were comfortable with your lack of them. They may say you've changed. They may call you distant, dramatic, selfish, but they don't see the way your body exhales after you say no without apologizing. They don't see the way your spirit softens after you leave a conversation where you no longer had to justify your pain. Every boundary you place is a love letter to your inner child, the one who used to say yes just to stay safe, the one who thought being chosen meant being useful. But you're no longer that child. You're someone who's learning that your energy is sacred, that you're allowed to protect your peace, that you don't need to bleed to prove you're kind. And slowly, something begins to shift. You stop over-explaining. You stop rushing to fix what isn't yours to heal. You stop saying maybe when your soul is already screaming no. You begin to realize that boundaries aren't walls. They're doors, ones that only open for love, that's willing to knock and ask permission to enter. And for the first time in a long time, you feel safe inside your own skin. No one came, so you became the one. There's a quiet kind of ache when you realize no one's coming to rescue you. No grand apology, no sudden awakening from the people who hurt you, no magical moment where they finally see your worth. Just silence. And in that silence, you learn how to hold yourself. The card that appears now is the star, a symbol of healing, of soft rebirth, of light that doesn't ask for permission to shine. It doesn't rise with a roar. It flickers gently, like hope returning after a long winter inside your soul. You stopped waiting for someone to say, "I see you," and started saying it to the mirror. You began tucking yourself in at night, with kind words instead of overthinking. You poured tea for one and made it feel like ceremony. You sat with your sadness not as a problem to fix, but as a companion who'd stayed far too long without being acknowledged. You wrote letters to the parts of you that no one ever loved out loud. And one evening, you whispered something brave. Maybe I'm not broken. Maybe I've just never been held right. Cancer, this is what healing looks like. Not perfection, not forgetting, but slowly learning to trust the ground beneath you again. To come home to your body, to your breath, to your boundaries. You begin to soften, not for others, but for yourself. You don't need to be fixed. You just needed space. And now you're giving that to yourself, a little more each day. So tonight, if it still hurts, if you still miss them, if you still feel like your heart is learning how to walk again, let that be okay. Healing is not loud. It's not linear, but it is yours. And right now, you are under the star, glowing in your own light, held by the sky itself, and beginning again. Not because someone saved you, but because you chose to stay with you. You are not your past. You are what you choose to become. There comes a moment, Cancer, when your healing stops being quiet and starts becoming powerful. You wake up one morning, and the ache is still there but different. It doesn't define you anymore. It doesn't write your story. You look in the mirror, and for the first time, you don't see the version of you who was abandoned. You see the one who survived it. The tarot now reveals judgment, a card of reckoning, of self-forgiveness, of rising up from the ashes, not with shame, but with clarity. You no longer ask, "Why did they hurt me?" You ask, "Why did I believe I deserved it?" And when the answer comes, not as blame, but as deep, sacred understanding, you begin to rewrite everything. You start to speak your truth, not to convince anyone, but to release yourself. You begin to set boundaries, not out of fear, but out of respect for your own peace. You stop chasing closure because you realize you are the closure. You are the ending. And the beginning, you walk back into old spaces that once made you feel small, and you no longer shrink. You no longer explain. You no longer apologize for the way your heart beats so loudly. This is not revenge. This is rebirth. The version of you that once begged to be chosen is now choosing themselves. With softness, with sovereignty, with an open hand not begging, but blessing. Yes, Cancer, you've cried, you've broken, but you've also risen. And this time, you rise not to prove anything, but simply because you finally believe. You are worthy of joy, worthy of peace, worthy of a love that never asks you to disappear in order to be loved. And that love, it begins with you. It has to begin with you. And in the end, I return to me. This is where the story changes, Cancer. Not because someone came back, not because they finally saw your worth, not even because life suddenly got easier. It changed because you came back to you. The final card drawn is the Ten of Cups. Not just a card of love, but of emotional fulfillment, of true belonging, of finding home within yourself. For so long, you made others your anchor. You searched for safety in their arms, for identity in their eyes, for validation in their approval. But now, you are the one creating the safety. You are the one holding space. You are the home you were always searching for. You no longer love in fear. You love in freedom. You no longer beg to be seen. You see yourself every shadow, every scar, every shimmer of light. You whisper to your younger self, the one who waited by the door, checking the phone, trying to be enough. You never had to earn love. You just had to come home to it. And here you are, not perfect, but present. Not healed, but healing. There's a quiet power in the way you breathe now, a softness in the way you hold your own hand, a courage in the way you still hope, even after everything. This is the final becoming. Not loud, not dramatic, just real, just you, in your fullness, in your depth, in your softness that once felt like a weakness, but now feels like the greatest strength you've ever known. So say it with me, Cancer. I am not who they left. I am not who they forgot. I am who stayed. I am who softened. I am who chose to begin again. And tonight, with no audience, no applause, no one watching but the stars, you choose you. Finally, completely, softly. And that, dear Cancer, is everything.